Hey everybody, it's Anthony. Today we're going to do a video on deep engraving and two options that you can choose to do a deep engrave with. We're going to be using layered vectors for the basis of our deep engrave, and we're going to use two methods to achieve this. One is going to be a 3D grayscale or height map, and the other one's going to be simply layering the SVGs on top of each other and achieving a deep engrave that way. So with no further ado, come along, let's get this started. Okay, so we have Lightburn loaded, and we'll just go ahead and import those SVGs now. Go ahead and hit shift click and click on the top layer, drag it over, shift click, hit the next layer, and we're going to get these all separated by layer type. And grab that base layer there, bring it across. Now we're going to try and organize these in something that's a little bit more visible. So the base layer will make layer 4 green. The next one up, we're going to go ahead and make that one red. And then go for blue. And then lastly, we're going to set this one up for black. Now we're going to change all of these to fill so you can see sort of like going from a progression of more filled with the green one to less filled with the black one. So essentially what we'll be doing is going from the bottom to the top, removing each layer from the layer below it so that we don't have areas that get double engraved or washed out. So we'll explain that process as we go forward. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate the red layer and drag it over to the green, switch it over to green. Oop, zoomed in a little too far, but we're getting that lined up good. Alright, so now that's the green layer. So all of the filled green areas are what our very bottom layer is going to engrave. So we're going to highlight that, drag it over to the page, and if you hit preview, you'll see here it says that we have some shapes that aren't closed. And if you look, it's not going to fill in all of the items that we need to. So we are going to go convert to bitmap, change the DPI to 500, and then immediately just go back and hit trace. And what this is basically going to do is if we set this ignore less than 20, it's going to only hit the main shapes that are filled and ignore those small overlap areas. So it's giving us the opportunity to basically forego those not closed shapes because the lines are just kind of overlapping funny, and it's not allowing us to get the engrave done. So we can just delete that, and we're going to move on to the next layer, which actually should be red. Yep, there we go. So we're copying blue because that's the layer sitting on top of red. Move it over to the red, line it up good, change it over to red once we get it lined up properly, and then drag it over to, we'll just hit shift click to make sure we get all of it, drag it over to the workspace, preview it, and you see we have open shapes again. So if you have a really good SVG that's lined up properly, you might not run into this problem and you can skip it. But if you hit preview and it says you have some open shapes, then go ahead and convert it to a bitmap and then immediately trace it. And you can see here we are again. There's that one little spot up there. We can kind of mess with it a little bit to try and see if we can get it to go away, or we can just settle and let it go through and then we can delete it later. So with a little bit of tweaking, you can see the lines are more or less lining up properly. If you mess around with some of the settings, it might kind of make things line up a little bit better. But you can see there's that clear point where it breaks off and disappears entirely versus just trying to get it to line up and trace the lines. So you can see up top there again, it's just not quite disappearing. And there we go, just give it a little nudge. Everything else seems okay. If there's a little bit of variation, it's not going to make a huge difference. You'll see at the end kind of how things line up. So we're going to go ahead and hit that with the OK, drag that over and try and line it up with the green layer. So you can see there's no overlap. Basically, where there is green, there is no red, and where there's red, there is no green. They all line up pretty nicely with each other. We're going to get that set. See, there's some really small gaps, but it's not a huge deal because these gaps are going to be in the 10th to maybe even like 100th of millimeters. It's not really going to translate over to the engraving. Now we have the blue layer that we're going to go ahead and get prepped. So we'll shift click on black, duplicate it, drag it over. The snap tool is pretty good with light burns, so you don't have to put too much work into it. And there we go. Now we have the blue engraved areas. You can see the open spots on the black are lining up well with the engraved spots on the blue. So you know we did that right. Drag that over, go ahead and convert it to a bitmap, set the DPI to 500, and then setting it to 500 just really like narrows down those lines so that when you click on it and go to trace image, it's not going to really detect those lines as well once you hit that cutoff threshold. So if you say ignore less than 20, then we can go ahead and you see all of these lines are doing pretty good. There's that one little spot there on the right hand side that's kind of showing up still. We can try and bump up our ignore less than, and you can see it's just really not doing a great job at avoiding that portion. So what we can do is that spot right there. So what we can do is just go ahead and let it go. And then when we zoom in, we can delete that bitmap first. And then we can zoom in, ungroup everything, and go ahead and just delete those little lines right there. Boom. Now we'll go ahead and regroup it so we don't mess up and screw up our SVG. And now it's all grouped back together, and we can click and drag that over to the green and red, get it lined up properly. And if we zoom in nice and tight, then you can kind of judge by the size of the gaps between everything. If you hold down the control button as you're making these adjustments, it kind of like lets you move around freely without snapping to any specific millimeter increments or anything like that. So you hold down control while after you click, and then just kind of drag things around, get it all lined up. You see we have on the bottom right there's a little bit of a gap there, and then on the top left there's a little bit of a gap there. Nothing too wide on either spot. Once again, these gaps are going to pretty much come out to be hundredths of a millimeter once we shrink this down to a size that it's going to fit on a coin. So it's not really going to be consequential. So with the black layer, we could go ahead and convert that over, and I'll show you why. Because even though it's just a layer that we haven't done any modifications to, there are still shapes that weren't closed inside that SVG. Maybe it has to do with the quality of the SVG. I'm not 100% sure why it's doing this. You might not run into this problem with some really nice SVGs. Maybe it's just these ones weren't the greatest quality, but go ahead and convert that over to a bitmap and then trace it. And you really, there's not anything that we need to eliminate, so pretty much leave it as it is, and it immediately does a good job at tracing it. And then we'll change that to black, nix that out, and there we go. So if we highlight it, hit preview, now you see that by turning it into a bitmap and then tracing that, it just closes all those shapes that were open before. So drag that over, zoom in, get everything lined up. Which it looks like we just need to nudge it down and to the right a little bit. And there we are. Boom. Everything's looking pretty good. Again, those small gaps that you see, this is 160 something millimeters wide. By the time we shrink that down to 30 something millimeters to fit inside of a 40 millimeter coin, you're not really going to have to worry about that. So we want to get a base round circle to fit around this. So you ungroup, go ahead and click on that outer line, duplicate it, and then we're going to drag that over to the workspace. And now we can shift click, and then we're going to deselect that and then regroup those so that we don't mess around and move something around and make it unaligned so that it messes up the engrave. So all of the black framework for the Viking head is grouped back together, and now we have this outline here that we're going to go ahead and drag to the center, change that over to yellow, and then we're going to take and make a circle, and then that circle we're going to drag over, set everything to page center so they're just kind of lined up, and then we're going to make this hopefully big enough to fit on the outside of the axe heads, and then move that up a little bit, and probably need to make it a little bit larger. There we go. And now we're going to have that deep engraved background for the surrounding area to fill in the inside of the coin with. So it's not just a head engraved down into the coin, it's going to be a head engraved into the coin with a deeper outline. And you'll see how that looks once we get the engrave started. So select everything, drag it over, and get it all lined up. Sometimes it helps to move the layer all the way to the bottom so you're not, the yellow isn't on top of all the other colors, it's underneath. So we get that all lined up, and you can see that everything's looking good. So we'll go ahead and get that preview opened up and see what this looks like. Yep, you can see with the preview, we'll drag it across, it's going to do that yellow border that we just did, and then you can see each layer filling in as we progress through the engrave. So let's go ahead now and get this sent over to the laser. As you can see here, we're using flood fill. I prefer to use that for the deep engraves. It gets through faster, I believe, and makes it go just a little bit quicker. I do follow up with some cleanup passes to get rid of those lines where the laser's jumping around. This outside area is going to be the one that gets the most engraving done so that we get nice and deep and we have that contrast between the deepest portion of the engrave and the design that we went ahead and set up inside Lightburn. So we went kind of to a time lapse and we're zipping through this real quick. You can see the laser filling in the different engravings layer by layer, and we're just about done. Doing a little bit of cleanup. And here is our finished product. You can see we got nice and deep from that angled shot there. And you can kind of see how those different layers interact with one another. So now that we've gotten that method done, let's go ahead and move on to the second method, which will be using a 3D height map. So here we are in Tinkercad, and you can see I already have the one layer loaded in. To import new ones, you go to the top right, import, choose a file, and then find the folder that they are located in. That's the one that's already loaded, so we're going to select number 3 and go ahead and set that to 7% of the original file size because that file is humongous. And it's going to go ahead and load in. My internet wasn't working so great this day, so it took a little bit of extra time to get these files loaded up. Fortunately, I had already set this up in a different file So here's the file loaded in Tinkercad and go into 3D mode. I just love the way Tinkercad gives those wacky names to your creations. But yeah, we got the 3D mode loaded up, and you can zoom in and see the base levels orange, purple, pink, and tan. Now that circle is a separate orange layer from the base layer of the STL, so you don't have to worry about that. It's going to be 4 layers plus the circle still. We'll go ahead and hit download, and then STL is the file format we're going to want to download in. Once again, with my internet not being top notch this day, it took a lot of extra time, so we'll go ahead and skip to the point where we already have the STL downloaded. So now that the file's downloaded, we're going to go ahead and go to the STL to PNG converter on GitHub, and we can load the file that we just downloaded from Tinkercad. And as you see, as it's generating, it goes and shows you the image as it processes it. So far, it's looking pretty good. So we'll go ahead and scroll up and click on the link that is provided for us to download the image and save it to our computer. And now that portion's done. We'll get switched over to Lightburn. Alright, here we are in Lightburn, and we're going to switch from CO2 to a fiber laser profile, since that's what we're going to be using for the engraving. Go ahead, and I accidentally hit open. What we want to do is go to import, and we're going to select the PNG that we just downloaded from STL to PNG. Now, if we go ahead and make a circle, what we're going to try and do is turn that into a tool line that matches the circle surrounding the Viking head. We'll go ahead and snap this to page center to help line it up a little bit better, and then scale the size of the circle to just inside the outer edge. I think is probably best for that gray circle in the image. And there we go. So we're going to go ahead and use that. So if we select the PNG and then hold shift and select the tool line, then we can go to tools and cut, and now there you are. That's removed from the rest of the image. So we're going to go ahead and slide that over, and then right click it, and we will ungroup, and then select and ungroup again, just to make sure it's all done so that it unlocks us being able to flatten the mask. And then we're going to right click again and go to edit image, and we're going to try and adjust. First off, we need to go to 3D grayscale. There we go. And then we're going to adjust the gamma and brightness and contrast to try and make sure we have the blackest of black, but also without sacrificing the whites. So we kind of want to get it so that that top layer is going to be as white as possible, and then the bottom layer as black as possible, so that we get a good contrast of height, because it's going to judge when we do the 3D grayscale. How bright the white is will be how tall it is, and how dark the black is will be how deep it is, how deep the engraving goes. So that looks pretty good at this point. I'm pretty happy with it. We need to go ahead and adjust the size, and the coins that I have are 40 millimeters, and 37.5 millimeters will get it so it's just inside that outer lip where the coin has that ridge in between. So that's going to be the perfect size for my coin. Your mileage may vary. And we'll save this file, and then we'll get it sent over to the laser computer, and we'll see you with the fiber laser. Here we are over at the fiber laser, and I did speed this up for time's sake, but you can see here we have 10 passes for the grayscale engraving per one pass that we're doing a cleanup. The cleanup pass will help keep some lines and ridges and abnormalities from showing up in your engrave. Sometimes that happens, but this was my first time doing a 3D grayscale engrave on this 50 watts, so I think I did pretty good, but honestly, when it comes down to it, I'll let you be the judge. We'll have the results here shortly. So we have the 3D grayscale coin here first, since that's the one we just finished up. And I do have to admit, this one got a higher level of detail than I really expected. And it also has crisper edges and lines than I had anticipated. Some of the previous engravings I've done, they kind of seemed to wash out a little bit, so it didn't seem like the lines were very sharp. But on this, you can actually catch your finger on the corners of some of these engravings, so like they have a nice crisp edge to them, and I'm really impressed by how well this turned out. The downside is you don't have the ability to have a dark background unless you're running really hot and really close line intervals for the entire engraving. Um, I have in the past done an outline, like a trace, and then traced the whole image and just did the outline of the entire design and then put a circle around that and use that as a guide to engrave. That's something that you could do. Maybe that's something I could do a short video about in the future to help out with. But as it is with this result, the background is really light, and I don't feel like the design pops out of the coin like it should. And most people I've spoken to agree. Some people do like this design though, so I mean, it's purely subjective, and I hope that you guys appreciate the outcome as much as I do. So I figured, why make you wait? I went ahead and opened up the file and right clicked on the image and clicked trace. And you can see by zooming in, it actually did a really good job without having to make any adjustments on getting that outline. And that's what I really want. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And you can see it brings the vector and the raster image there. So I'm going to go over and uncheck the box for the image, and it just leaves the trace that we just made. I'm going to right click and ungroup, then click on the outer circle, then click on the part that I want to keep while holding shift, then go to edit, invert selection, and then hit backspace to delete all the stuff that I want to get rid of. So when we go to fill, we've got that nice outline that we were looking for that's going to give us a nice dark background for that engraving. I really hope this helps out. And here we are with the vectorized coin. The first thing that catches my eye with this one is that it does have a much darker background to it, and I probably could have gone a little bit darker if I'd spent the time on it. This coin, admittedly, I did wrap up somewhere after 11 o'clock at night and was kind of in a hurry to get home. So there are a few small touches that I probably would have done differently on this, and I would maybe in a different circumstance tried putting the coin back on and finishing it up. However, I didn't want to mess this one up and have to redo the whole coin all over again, so I just kind of left it as is. The background does have some lines in it from the deep engrave. I probably would have spent a little bit of time making the background darker and maybe doing some more cleanup passes to get rid of those lines. Another thing is some of the details on the inside of the engraving, I might have gone layer by layer and set different speed, power, and kilohertz settings to those layers to kind of give them different colors so they're a little bit more easily distinguishable from one another. The details on the 3D grayscale one really popped, and I feel like this one was kind of handicapped, and again, I feel like that's 100% my fault for not having a little bit more time to sit down and kind of hash this out. So I feel like this one turned out really good. And I think the fact that it took just shy of an hour versus just shy of 3 hours kind of puts it ahead in my book, because even if I'd spent 15 extra minutes on this one, that's an hour and 15 minutes versus nearly 3 hours. This also, another thing to keep in mind is this is the first time I had used this newer laser to do a deep engrave like this, so it's kind of something that I'm still trying to get used to and learn. So I could probably cut a little bit of time off of both coins, but at the end of the day, you're still looking at double or even triple the time to do the 3D grayscale engraving. Ultimately, it's going to be your decision to go with the one that you like most and the system that you're most comfortable using, whether it be creating the STL and converting it to a height map, or organizing the vectors one by one and overlapping them so that it engraves the correct way. I believe personally, once you get used to that method, it's probably going to be a lot faster. It's not going to take you an extra 2 hours to line the vectors up right after the first couple times that you do it, for sure. So you're going to ultimately be saving time, in my opinion, sticking with the vectorized file. And then you also have the opportunity of picking individual layers at the end and assigning different frequencies, etc., to get a desired color or finish. So I think that's a plus for the vectors as well. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's going to be your decision. So all I want to do is provide you with the information and let you make your choice. I really hope this helped. If you did like this video, then please give it a like and maybe consider subscribing. It would help a lot. I want to get this information in front of as many faces as possible to help as many people as possible, because I feel like this is something that's going to help a lot of people kind of step up their game, not just with coins, but with any kind of deep engraving. So thank you very much for spending your time with me. I do appreciate it, and I'll look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.